Hi, everyone. This is BP NNA architecture part B. This one essentially deals with understanding the BP simulator. Obviously, to understand any network architecture, if we can work out an example from say from starting to the end, probably you would have learned everything about that network. So understanding the simulation trace is very important. So what it is going to cover, as indicated in part B of this simulation trace of this video. This one covers NNet. Essentially we're going to have two subsections. First part we're going to deal with the NN training, that is the network simulation trace. And then the main thing that you need to understand for as far as you are concerned for your exams, how to solve numeric problems in the problem set. If you look at the I'm going to show you the problem set, how your problems will be set and what you are supposed to do to solve those problems. Essentially it involves I will usually give in all the tests, in fact for all the network architectures, I would give some simulation traces, and essentially some of them are blanked out, and all that you need to do is you need to fill up those blanks in the simulation trace. That in the current thing I recopied the named this document and call this doc6d. That's essentially is a BP problem set. So if you look at this problem set, and that's a problem. Let's see how this problem set appears and how you're supposed to solve that problem, and how this entire about this section is to how to fill up those blanks and how to solve those problems. So if you look at this document here, let's the problem set that you have. So if you look at the problem set, essentially you have some theory problems at the beginning. We got some theoretical problems at the beginning. Obviously these you can follow through when I go through the lectures, and also you read through the documentation. You should be able to fill up those questions very easily, able to solve those questions easily. This right now I actually have about 27 problems are there, but the important thing is the numeric problems. So if you go through this, if you look at the what the problems that you have, if you see, this is the when you do the backpropagation simulation, if you run it, it will generate output simulation trace, and basically you need to understand A to Z about this simulation trace. For that you would see that, for example, in this case, this BP network, it will go through a set of a sequence of operations by which it is going to be trained. So when it is trained, it is essentially has got about 5 or 6 steps that it's going to do. So if you look at this sequence, the simulator it will go through 6 step-by-step procedures. That would include, for example, in this case, the any given any simulation trace, whenever you do the training, first actually it starts with some excuse me. First it's gonna display some it'll go through some of these okay. If you look at this, it will display first all the input data from the input data file. When you do the simulation, it is going to read the input data to the network from an input data file, and then that data will be displayed first. So in terms of the after the reading is done, what else the network is going to do, that would include first it's going to assign all the random weight to the 3 weight matrices, that the input weight matrix, the hidden layer weight matrix, and output layer weight matrix. So in this case, you see it started these weights and the network weights, and initially started with excuse me. Again, if you go through this simulation trace, basically what you have here is the first step is it's going to display all the input data from the input data file. For example, this is all the network number of layers and the type of training coefficient that you're going to use, the type of transfer function that you're going to use, the gain factor that you used with the transfer functions, what is the threshold error to the network, how many patterns that you want to train, and what those patterns are. When that is done, the first thing that you want to do is assign random weights to the 3 weight matrices, W in, WH, and W out. As you could see here, we started 3 random weights between plus minus 0.1 to plus 1 over 0.1. See, it started with the 3 weight matrices with the random numbers. Again, you see they're all between minus 0.1 to plus 0.1. So this is initial randomized weight matrices. Again, this network happens to be again, this is a 3-2-2 network. That is the 3 in the input layer, 2 in the 3 in the primary input, 3 primary inputs, 2 in the input layer, 2 in the hidden layer, and 2 in the output layer. So if you look at the first one will have 0 to 3, next one will have 0, 1 and 2, and then second one will have 0, 1, 2, and the last one would have 2, 3 elements. So we'd have those are the randomized weight matrices. Once that is done, then you're going to do is to do what you call the forward pass. That forward pass, if you recall, nothing but finding the values of applying primary input, finding the values of in, yn, and then ih by h, and then I out and y out. That is going through all these from the primary inputs to the computing the output activations is called the forward pass. As you could see here, here you see that this is the forward pass. That is the first you find sum is internal activation, ACT is y, and this is I, that's y. So in this case, you'll find the internal activation. Use this to compare the activations in the input. This is the activation and the I and Y for the for the input layer. Then use these I and activations to compute I and Y for the hidden layer. That is the hidden internal activation. These are the corresponding activation. Use this next. Use H activations to compute I and Y at the output layer. So here at this point you know the desired values. So based on that, you can check if the go forward pass, check if the network is trained. How do you check the network is trained? This particular one, in this case, say for example we want to train this network. If we have a 3 to 2, 2 to 2, we have to specify 3 inputs and 2 outputs. So if we apply 101, we have to get 01. So after doing the forward pass, what we have here is the values is 0.53 and 0.57. Now the threshold error that we have set for this one at 0.1, what it means is the desired value for this is 0 and the desired value for this one is 1. So with the 0.1 or 10% error, this has to be less than it has to be trained such that this will becomes less than 0.1, and this is the d equal to 1, and that is should be trained better than 0.9. So the obviously this is not trained, and so if it's not trained, what you're going to do is you're going to go to step 3. That means in this case you're going to find all the what's called the delta functions for all the output layer, hidden layer, and the input layer elements. Now you see this that's not listed here. Here you would see in the next one some sort of activation. You see these are all the delta functions for the you would start at the output layer, then you compute hidden layer, then the output layer. That's the next step is to if it is not trained, you find the delta functions first. Once you have delta functions, then you will be able to find find the weight changes. These are all the weight changes for each of the elements, delta weights, matrices for each of the 3 weight corresponding. So once you have this, you can use this. Once your delta functions weight changes are made, you can find the new weights by adding the old weight matrices with the new weight changes. That would give you the new weights. And that's actually, this one is blanked out, but if you see the full simulation test, you would have that. So in this case, the weight changes are done here. Then once that is done, then again, once a few matrices are done, then redo the forward pass, and then again check if it is not trained or not. Then you find the delta function, then find the weight changes, then you find the weight matrix, and so forth. So that has to be repeated. So in anything, one need to understand all the basic steps. What do you mean by a forward pass? When you do how the you need to understand how these sometimes activations are computed, how sums and activations are computed here, how sums and activations are computed at the output layer, how the delta functions are computed, how the delta weight changes are made, how the new weights are computed, and so in addition to that, there is also what is called the cumulative error for the network. You need to figure out how much that will give you. That is a monitoring parameter to find how much is the error that you have in the network, and that's one of the ways to see how far a network has come from the initial training and how it is progressing. So that's so essentially once the simulation tests are given, you should able to fill those things. This blank, for example, if you put a blank here and find out how much it is, you should be able to find that value. in the test you will not have these values, so this will be blanked out. Okay, fill up how much is this value here, put a blank here, and then find out what this value here, put a blank here. In the test you will have a blank here and find out what is the B4 values. When you say B3 values is nothing but what this is a new weight matrix. This is a new weight value. You take the original weight and then add this delta weights, and then you get this is the weight changes, of course, here. And if you take here in this case, for example, if this is blanked out, what is the I here? How to compare the internal activation of this? It happens to be the hidden layer internal activation 2. How to compute that value? So first of all, you make sure you know what they are, and you should know how to compute them. And similarly, when you come over here, BP, for example, in this case, how to compute the values of delta functions. How to compute delta function for the, say for example here, what is the delta function for the output layer? How you might have some other function here. How to find out the delta function for hidden layer? They how to find the delta function for the 4, that is the element number 4, and how that is computed. And this is the weight change. How to find the weight changes in weight from the input layer 3 to input HL number 4 element. So basically these the way these are computed, these are illustrated in the document B with the formulas and with the equations and how to solve it. So if you understand that, filling up this will becomes very easy. Obviously you need to understand all the notations, and obviously you have to know what they are, and you will be able to compute it. So in the simulation trace, what I will be going through, I'm going to show you specific elements, how they are computed, and then if you understand that, then you will be able to understand this one also. Again, they're all going to be the same. In every case, you would go through all these things. You should know how to do the forward pass. You need to find out how to find the delta functions, how to find the weight changes, and so forth. So if you look at the trace that we're going to go through, and how these various elements, internal activations, delta functions, weight changes, and so forth, it will show you how to do that. If you look at the document B, again, if you how to fill up those blanks in the simulation traces, we can do that by looking this example that's on chapter 8. For example, for backpropagation, this is on page 190. This is a simulation trace. If you look at if you go through the simulation trace, you would see, say, it identifies some of the what are called the footnotes. So it will indicate, for example, this one is the input activation for the element number 3, and it will show if you go to that footnote at the bottom of this document, it will show you how what this value is, how that is computed. Similarly, if you go here, obviously this is activation. This is the footnote number 2. This is how the corresponding activation for the input layer 3 is computed. This will show how the internal activation, that is the activation. Similarly, if you go further down, here you would see remember in our case, first actually find all do the forward pass, and then you might have the footnotes in the sums and activations here, or you might have sums and activations here, or sums and activation here. These footnotes could be either here, here, or here. Now this one indicates actually this is number 3, how to compute the delta function for the output element number 3, how to compute the delta function for the hidden layer element number 3. This will show how the delta function for the input layer element number 3 is computed. and this will show how to, this is a, I believe the delta weight changes, how to do how much is the weight change that you need to make for the weight PI4 to primary input 4 to the input layer element number 1 W41. Similarly, how to make weight change, that is from 3 to 2 here. So if you 8, that is for the weight change from the hidden layer to the output layer elements. So this all actually shows different examples how to make how weight changes are computed. This will show, for example, how the once the weight changes are made, then you get the new weight matrices. These are actually, what is this new weight matrix? How do you get the new weight matrix from the world matrix and if you have weight changes, how to get the new one? When that is done, then it will shows you, you go through again. Once that is done, you see, remember in this case, once the weight matrices are done, we find the new weight matrix. That's what we do here. Once that is done, then you got the step number 2. Step number 2 is nothing but do it forward pass. You see this? So we did, after that is done, actually it has gone through step 3 and computed all the new weight changes. When that is done, it checks whether it is trained or not. If it is trained, then actually, so at that point it's gonna display the current value of the cumulative sum of squares error. That error is computed. Once it is trained, basically what it's going to do is once if it is trained, it will go to step number, not step number 8, it's step number 6. That is the it got the network, write the network into BPCKT file. See, in this case BPCKT. I think in the old version of the simulator I put like BPCKT file. It's a newer version, I call it bp-ckt.txt file. It's a lot more easy to have file extension txt rather than a text file. I should have an extension of txt. But anyway, that's all. So if you go and look at this footnotes, it will show you how to compute this value. For example, if you go in the first element here, the first element is C, this is W1, this input activation. So if you go to the footnote, that one, you have got 10 footnotes. See here, these are 10 footnotes. How it will show how the first input activation is computed, how the second problem is solved, how the third fill up the blank is done, how the fourth blank is filled up, fifth blank filled up, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. So it will show you exactly how values are compared to what they are, and for that instance of those values, it computes that value. So that's what we actually will be going through this simulation trace, what they are and what they are. And let's go through this 10 example. That will cover all aspects of the network training. That includes the sums and how to compute sums and equations, how to compute delta functions, how to compute the weight changes, and how to compute the new weight matrices, and then how to find the current total network error, then going through it. So this will have all the steps involved in the overall network training. So if you look at the first example, let's see here number 1. Again, if you look into this, the simulation trace, let's say if this is blanked out, let's say how to fill that equation, what it is. Obviously it is the this is the input layer elements, number 3. We want to find out what the corresponding I would be for this. To be able to find the internal activation here, you would see that to get this equation, we need to find the corresponding this internal activation is given by weighted sum of the inputs times the weighted sum of the inputs. In this case, the k, remember k equal to 0 is the primary inputs, k equal to 1 is the input layer elements. This is k equal to 2, that's k equal to 3. So here in this case k equal to 1. In this case we have to find the value of the k is 1 and the value of the j is 3. So we need to find out I of for the layer number 1 and the element number 3. You find out the apply x of 0. X of 0 of I is nothing but the primary inputs. You need to find out the corresponding value of weighted sum. So the essentially you take your first the weight matrix. The Wx of I0 is nothing but the primary inputs, that is from I equal to 0, 1, 2 and 3, 0 to 4. So if you apply 0 to 4 elements, what is the input primary input vector? If you look at the primary input vector is nothing but the primary input vector is we have bias term 0, that's going to be 1, and then you have 1 0 1 0 1 1. So if you look at this here, the primary inputs are given by the first part is x, and the second part is the corresponding weight matrix. So the first one is 1, and that is the 0th term, that is 1 0 0 1, that is the bias term 1 0 0 1, that is the activation, that is x0, that is x of x1, x2, x3 and x4. So you see this is x1, that is x1, that is x2, x3 and x4, and the 0th term is 0. And what is the corresponding weight matrix that we want to find out? That we want to find out the element number for the element number 3. So if you want to find out for the element number 3, this is the input layer number 3 from the primary inputs, that is from x0, x1, x2, x3 and x4. So what the weight matrix that we need to do is that is 1 1 0 0 1 has to be multiplied with this weight matrix, that is the in 3 column. So that is 092, 016, 042, 058 and 084. You see that is the 1 is multiplied with 092, and then this 1 is multiplied with 0116. Next this the next the 0 is going to be next weight matrix is 016, and that is 042, and that's 058, and that's 084. So if you multiply, it would be actually nice if you put all the x's in one row and all the weights in other row. So in that case you would have 1 1 0 0 1, and then this would have this vector which is going to be entire vector here in another column. And that would actually much easier to understand and easy to follow than multiplying the individual elements. But so if you do multiply all of them together and then add them, you will get 008. So if you go and look at what is the internal activation that we have, and that's what we have, 008. That's applying the primary inputs to these elements matrix here, this weight matrix, so that you can get the input element number 3. Similarly, if you go to the number 2, what is the number 2? This is the activation for the input layer. So if you go back and look at what is the transfer function that we have used for the activations, you see here for the input layer and the hidden layer, and that HLTF and ILTF or sigmoid. So the type of transfer function is the sigmoid transfer function. So to get these values of the network, you simply take that is I, and the value of the y is nothing but sigmoid transfer function, that is the y will be given by transfer function times ij. In this case this happens to be the transfer function y3, which is the value of the I divided by 1 plus e to the power of the ig or g gain times I. So if you, in this case I happens to be 008, And gain factor. The gain factor we already seen. That is the input data. Again, the gain factor for the sigma transfer function is in this case, if you look into the input data part, that's 10. So therefore, the value of y3 is going to be 1 by 1 plus e to the power ig. That is the gain is 10 and I is this thing. So if you compute the value of this function, it comes out to be 519989. So if you go back and look at that, the value of the activation in the second blank that is filled, you see the 51908. That's what you have. So if in the test, if this is blanked out and then actually fill up this blank, you essentially have to know how to compute the value of I, or most of the time either you ask this or you ask this, can any one of them, not both. So obviously if I'm asking for this and this, usually it will be blanked out so that you won't be able to compute this value from this or this from here. So that's the activation. Obviously if I put a blank here, then if you know this value, instead of taking this I value, you will take that I value, and then you to e to the power of ig. This happens to be I and g, the same value throughout the computations. Similarly, if you go to the next one, these are all the number 3 is the delta function. How to compute delta function for the element number 3 here. So if you look at the delta function for the element number 3 here, as you know, for the output layer elements, the delta function is simply given by y into 1 minus y times d minus y. So now once we have done the forward path, we know all the values of y of yj, and also we know the desired value is 101. So for the element in this particular spot you are interested, this happens to be the d of delta j k. K in this case obviously k equal to 3, and j is the element number 1, that is number 3. So that's the d3 minus y3 times y3 1 minus y3. Most of the time actually in case of the simulation test, this is listed as a y out. So in this case this is d3 out, d out, and that's y out, and that's y out, that's y out. So if you that's in this case, what is the value of the element number 3? Element number 3 activation we already know. So here through the forward path is 506. So if you know the 506 our activation, then that's the activation. And so if you see that that is a d minus y. What is the desired value? This is what we need is 101. 101 means that is the desired value is 1, and the computed value is 506 times 506. That gives you d minus y, and y into 1 minus 5, that's 506 times 1 minus 506. So if you go back and compute that value, that's going to be 1.2342 into e to the minus 1, and that's what we have here. That's for the element number 3. Similarly, if you go back and compute let's say I want to compute the delta function for the hidden layer. Now how do you compute the delta function for the hidden layer? So the output functions is very simple, simply y into 1 minus times d minus y. If you go into the hidden layers, now the number 4, in that case the delta function for the hidden layer element number 3 it is still going to be the gradient times error, but this error for all the hidden layer and also the input layer is computed at the weighted sum of the output errors. So what do you mean by output errors? In this case, if you want to compute the delta here, we essentially this value, you know, the activation for the HL3, that is y into 1 minus y. So that part is very simple. Next one is the weighted sum. What is the weighted sum? That weighted sum is nothing but you're going to have weight from HL3 to OL1, HL3 to OL2, and HL3 to OL3. So if we take the weight from HL3 to OL multiplied by this delta function, this multiply the weight from 03 to O2 and multiplied by the delta function, and take HL3 to OL3 weight and multiply this delta function, add all of them together, you would get the delta function here, and that's what we have here. So if you look at this here, that's y into 1 minus y, that part is the same. Now if you look at these delta functions, this is the first function is HLO3 into OL1. Next one is the weight function. This is the first delta function. First delta function is 7.7 into, this is I think there is not think it is typo is there, it's not 7.7, it is 0.77. The 10 to the minus 3, that's going to be 0.77. So the that is 0.77 times say weight matrix. What is the weight matrix? So that is the delta is the first element. This is the weight from HL3 to OL1. The next one is this is delta. This is delta 2, and that's delta 3. So if you look at the corresponding weights, to HL3 to OL1 and OL2 OL3 in the weight matrix. See this in this case HL3 to if you look at the HL3 to OL, these are the three weights. That is HL3 to OL1. Again, this weight times this delta function, this weight times delta 2 function, and this weight times delta. So what are the weights? That is first one is OL3 to delta O1, that is the 0.62. The next one is 0.32. Next one is 0.32. And this is delta 1, that is the output layer delta 1, and this one is the output layer delta 2, and this is the output layer delta 3. So weight matrix, that is 0.62 times this delta, 0.3 minus 0.32 into this delta, and this matrix this delta, and that's what we have here. So if you multiply all these things and add them up and multiply it with the gradient, again this part is the error part, and that part is the gradient part. So the of course if it is output layer, this is very simple. It's simply replaced by simply d minus y. But for all the hidden layer elements and also the input layer elements, you have to do as a weighted sum of the output membership functions. Output means for the hidden layers, the output layer is the output layer. For the input layer, the output layer is going to be the hidden layer. So using hidden layer, you can compute the delta function for the input layer. So that's how you can get the value here. So if you look at the now that's number 4. If you look for the number now that's number 4 here, and if you look at the weight delta function for the, say for example, the input layer element number 3, again to find the weight matrix, that's the delta function here, it is very simple. In this case is y into 1 minus y. In this case is the activations of the input element number 3, y into 1 minus y, and times the weighted sum of the output functions. Output functions in this case for the input layer, those are the hidden layer. So the summation is going to be input layer, this weight from here to HL1 times this delta function, the weight from in03 to HL2 times this delta function, and in3 to delta function here. So if you look for the in3 to HL 01, 02, 03, so what we have here is the so if you look at the what we are interested in the weight matrix from the input layer 3, excuse me. Again, to find the delta function here, we have to know the weights from in3 to HL, in3 to HL2, and in3 to HL3 here, and then multiply these delta function. So if you look at the weights from in3 to HL, see, in3 to HL is the, for example, these are the three weights, that is 0.62 into this delta 1, 0.8 times into this delta, and 0.04 into this delta. So if you look at these functions, the delta functions are, so the delta functions, that is, sorry, if you look at this 0.26, number 5, sorry. So if you look at this 0.52, that is weight is again now sorry, this input 3, the weights from 3 to 1, 2 and 3 are, so if you look at the in 3 to 1 to 3, you have got 0 to 6, 0, 8 and 0 to 4. So you see that these are again, sorry, we have then put number 5 is this is for into what is the delta function for the input layer element number 2 here. That's the if you want to find the input function for in 3, so basically what you have to do is you have to know what is the weight from 2 to 1, 2 to 3 and 2 to 3, 2 to 2 and 2 to 3, and multiply the corresponding weights, the weight from here to delta 1 times this delta, weight from in 2 to O2 times this delta, weight from in 2 to 3 times this delta. So if you look at the weights from in 2 to HL layer, in 2 to HL layer, if you look at that's in 2 to HL layer, these weights are 0.58, 0.18 and 0.82. That's, and then essentially you multiply 0.58 times delta H1 and 0.18 and this delta, and this 0.82 and this L3, and that's what we have here. So if you look at the 0.4, that is 0.58, that's weight times delta. First weight is 0.58, second weight is 0.18, and third weight is 0.62. And these are the HL delta functions 1, 2 and 3. What are the HL delta functions 1 to 3? Those are the delta functions for 1 to 3. One is the that's 42 into 10 to the minus 4. The next one is 1.78 10 to the minus 1 minus 3, and this is the 35 into 10 to the minus 3. So if you multiply all these three together, what is the activation for the into layer? For the into, the activation is this. If it for the into, the action is 0.44. So that's why you got a 44 into 1 minus 0.44. That gives the gradient, and then you multiply that, it gives you the weighted sum. And so if you compute that value, it comes out as 4.81 into 10 to the minus 5, and that's what we have. We should have, see this 4.8 into 10 to the minus 5, that's what you get it. So essentially you have to, for any given things, you'll be able to, you should be able to fill those blanks here. Of all the computations, probably all other computations are very easy, but except this function, these are things that really need to be careful. This usually involves quite a few multiplications and additions. So make sure you're careful with this function. All others are really very simple, like changing the weight changes, and weighted sum is also to be a little careful. It might involve, but this is probably the little bit more difficult one than any other calculations. So now once we know how to compute these delta functions. So if it is blanked out here, you know how to compute. If it is blanked out, you know how to compute. If it is blanked out here, you know how to compute it. So obviously you should, whichever is blanked out, you should be able to compute it. Main thing, make sure obviously you should understand how 100% of the simulation trace. Only then you will be able to compute it. The next part is the 6 is the weight change. So in this case, weight change means how much is this is for the input weight matrix, that is from primary input to the input layers. So we want to find out how much is the weight change from the input layer, primary input layer x4 to the in1, which is the input layer weight change. Now if you go into look into the weight change, how you find the weight change? Weight change is nothing but any delta w. Weight change is nothing but del w, dw or del w is alpha times the input times the delta function. So in this case, this happens to be k equal to 1. So in that case, it will become k equal to x. If it's k equal to 1, that becomes k minus 1 is 0, and delta k becomes 1. That is the thing. So if you alpha in this case is the training coefficient, you could see the training coefficient at the beginning, that is listed in the input data, that happens to be 0.8. See, that's training coefficient in this case happens to 0.8. that is going to be fixed. So if you look at the then for that you have to know how much is the weight change that you want to make is nothing but alpha times the whatever the activation of the PI4, which is nothing but, excuse me, the PI4, that's x4 times the input. Remember in this case x4 is nothing but it is, remember the input vector is 1 0 0 1, so that the input is 1 here, and what is the delta function? That is the delta function for the input layer element number 1. So if you look at the input layer activation 1, that is the what we need is the, for this one we need to in1 delta function in 1.97 into 10 to the minus 5. So if you look at this, the training coefficient is 0.8. The input from here to here, that is the input to the hidden, primary input to the hidden layer, that is the x4 is equal to 1, and the delta function for the in1 happens to be 1.97. So again now it is you need to understand here, if you apply if you want to find the weight change from here to here, we have to know the PI4, which is x4, and then that multiplied by the alpha multiplied by x4 multiplied by the delta of in1 will give you the weight change here. So you would see that alpha times x is the input activation, and delta is the output activation. Again, the weight change is a product of 3 terms, that is the training coefficient times input activation times the output delta function. So in this case that's fixed, and this input vector is 1, and the delta function for the 1 is 1.97. so if you compute that, it comes out as 1.57 into the minus e to the minus 5. So that's if you put it in decimal format, it comes out be if you round it to the 6th decimal place, you will get 4016, and that's what we have here. Similarly, if you want to find the weight change here, we have to know what is the in3 is, alpha times in3 activation times the delta function at the HL2. Now if you look at the here, now if you look at this here, the in that is a PA for the in3 activation is the in3 activation. If you look at this, okay, the in3 activation is 519. So the 0.8 times 519 times the delta function on the hidden layer hidden layer 2, and that's HL2. So that HL2 happens to be it's 1.71 into 10 to the minus 7, so that's 1.7. So multiply all of them together. You have to make sure you're careful with exponent. E is not E, it is 10 to the, it's scientific representation of the numbers. That means it's 10 to the minus 3, not e to the minus 3. So if you multiply this number, you will get 1.7 into e to the power minus 5 is the same thing as 30715, and that's what we have here. Similarly, if you go to the next section, next problem, this is the first 7 and 8 are how to compute the weight changes. Number 8, this also weight change from HL3 to OL. Obviously, we should know the activation to find out the alpha times activation of HL3 times the delta function of OL3. So that's very simple. So if you take the alpha, which is obviously is training coefficient, times the activation for the HL3. So if you look for the activation of HL3, the activations of the HL3 is 515. So that's what we have. It is that's 515, and we need to have the number 8. And delta O3. If we look for the delta O3, that is the element number 3 delta function. OL3 is 1.2 into 10 to minus 1, and that's what we have here. 1.23 into 10 to the minus 1, that's what is. So if you multiply all of them together, you'll get a 0.5, so forth. 0.5. That's what you got, 0.5. So you can simply, weight changes are very simple. The alpha times the input activation of this element multiplied by the delta function of that element, and times the training coefficient will give you the weight change. Okay, once you have that, then all that we have to do is find the new weights. This particular one, I actually say what is the new weight here. This new weight is nothing but add the corresponding elements. So for number 9, if you go and actually add the corresponding weights, again the way you do the corresponding weights in the next, these are the weights for the next cycle, which is n plus. If the current cycle is n, the next cycle is going to be n plus 1. So the new weights are going to be n is the old weights plus the weight change, that I think weight change. You need to add the corresponding elements. So in this case, we have the, if you get the weight change happens to be that is 3 to 1, that is from 3 to 1. So if you look for the 3 to 1, sorry, 3 to 1, which 3 to 1, excuse me, now that is in 3 to HL1. If you look for in 3 to HL1, okay, in 3 to HL1, in 3 to HL1, okay, the original weight is 3 zeros, that will be minus 3 zeros is 175, and that is the I'm sorry, this is the weight change. This is the weight change, and what is the original weight? And the original weight for this is in 3 to HL1, sorry. Again, this one is sorry. This is the weight change from the in 3 to HL1. So if you write it down, so the in 3 to HL1. Okay, in 3 to HL1. Okay, if the word, this is the original weight matrix from in 3 to HL1, that is originally 0.026, that is the original weight, and the weight change is the delta weight matrix from in 3 to HL1 is minus 0.0000175. Obviously it's a very small number. The original weight was 0.026, and then subtract the 0.075. Obviously it is going to be close to 0.26. So if you look for the new number, that is so original value was 0.26. So you subtract like the 3 zeros and 3 zeros 175. It's a very small change. It's obviously slightly less than 0.26, and so that you get your new weight. And once that is done, obviously you should be able to essentially add the corresponding elements for each of them. Take the original value, add the weight change to that element, and then you get the new weight here. The next one is the what is the total cumulative sum of squares of error. This sum of squares error is given as in general, the total cumulative sum of squares error is given by 1 by Pmax. Then you divide for individual patterns. It's d minus y squared divided by the number of elements that you have in the output layer. That gives you remember it's a RMS value, d minus y square it, and then you divide by the number of elements, that gives you mean. Then you take the square root of that would give you for the error for one p, and if you repeat for all p's, you'll get the sum of for all the patterns. Then you divide by the Pmax, that gives the cumulative sum of squares error for all the patterns. If you have only one pattern, then you simply actually do this one time. So the obviously the p would go from anywhere from 0 to Pmax minus 1, and j would vary from 1 to nk, which is all nk in this case is the output layer. So if you look at this, the weighted sum, what is the desired value and what is the computed values. The computed values in this case is Again, to compute here we got only one pattern. So the activation that are output activation that are computed after the first this value is y first value is 6 5, that is a y1, that's a y2 and y3, that's y out 1, y out 2 and y out 3. So the again the desired value is at the output is 101. So the one, this is the desired value is 1 and the current value is 0.65. This is the desired value is 0, current value is 0.66, and desired value is 1, the computed value is 0.50. So if you look at this here, there is a 101, that is the desired value, and computed value is 65, 66 and then 64. So obviously you take the individual elements, take the difference and square them up, take the difference, square them up, take the difference and square them up. Once you get that, you get a squared value, and then you, in this particular case, we got at the output we have 3 elements, therefore you divide by 1 by 3, and then you take the square root of the whole thing, that is from here to the whole thing here. So when you do that and then go and compute this value, it comes as 1.51761 there. So if you round it to the second decimal place, what you're gonna get will be 52, and that's what we have here in this number 10. That's fine. It's somehow this there was some error in the old simulation trace. It's kind of displayed one cycle later. This is in the new simulation trace. I have corrected it, but this for phi2, this total cumulative sum of error square should have been immediately after the first pass. This is where it should have been, and unfortunately I think I displayed it kind of at the end of the cycle. That means it appears in the next cycle, but that has been corrected, and in the new simulation traces it will appear immediately after the forward pass. So, and that's how actually so that will essentially, this covers every aspect of the program, the computing the internal activations and the output activations, whether it's the input layer or hidden layer, output layer, it doesn't matter. How to compute the delta functions for the output for hidden, how the input layer, how to perform simply the weight changes, then how to compute add the new weights, getting the new weights. That's very simple. Adding corresponding elements, and then computing how the corresponding cumulative error of the network. And so with that, I say essentially once the training is done, basically what it's going to do is if the network is trained, this particular one here is network is trained, here it is tested, it is ended because output value is 0.84 here, 0.84 here, 0.84 here, and the threshold error that we have set for this one was if you go back and look at the threshold error in this case is 0.30. That means if you look at the output trace at the end of it, what we have is in this case we got threshold error is 0.3. What it means is this should be this 101 is the vector that we need. So this element should be greater than 0.7, this has to be greater than 0.7, and this has to be less than 0.3. So all of them are, this is definitely greater than 0.7, this is definitely 0.7, and this is definitely less than 0.3, and therefore it is trained. And so it discontinues. After that, what it's going to do is it takes all these current weight matrices that we have. These are the new current weight matrices. And then what it does, it stores into a BP CKT file. So when you go into the recall mode, it reads the data from the this CKT file, and then for a given input it computes the corresponding output, and that's what we are going to look into the recall mode simulation trace next. So that would cover again understanding these nodes and then filling up these blanks. They will give you all the answer that you need to know and need to have how to fill up these blanks. And so it is with the formulas, with the equations, it identify how the various elements of the simulation trace have to be computed. So this part is very, very important. Now we'll look at the recall mode. In the recall mode, again, as we have seen at the end of the network training, it stores all the weighted net matrices. In this case, it displays it stores the number of elements that you have in the primary input, the input layer, hidden layer, output layer. It also includes what type of transfer function that are used. The first one identifies the transfer function that you use with the input and hidden layers, and the next one indicates what the transfer function for the output layer. G stands for sigmoid, S stands for the sine, and T stands for the tan. In this case, we are using essentially sigma transfer function for all layers. That is the gain factor that is used with sigma transfer function. Remember, it is 1 by 1 plus e to the power minus I times g, and that g is 10 here. And then so based on that, obviously the first there should have some spacing should have been given, but the first element is 4 by 3 weight matrix, that is the 0, 1, 2, 3 and 3 matrix. Next one is going to be 4 by 3, so that is going to be, that is from here 1, 2, 4, 3, and this is 4 by, and again that's 4 by 3 weight matrix. So essentially the first 3 rows are the input weight matrix, the next the 3 rows are the hidden WH, and the next 3 rows are the W out weight matrix. Once that is done, it will go into the recall mode. So if you look at the recall mode trace, in this case the weight matrix reading the network, once it is in recall mode, it first reads the network weights from BP CKT file, then it displays the input weight matrix, the hidden layer weight matrix, and then output layer matrix. And also displays all the what the transfer functions that are there used for the input and hidden layers, output layer, and also the gain factor for that. So once that is done, back propagation network testing input, what you do is apply a primary input vector. Say for example, if you apply like a 1001, then it computes the corresponding value of the output vector. So the in this case, the one of the mistake that I have made was it's hard to actually find out if you are in a test. If I give, okay, if you apply like 10001 and then what the values of the say Y01, it's almost impossible to compute, because it involves so many computation. That is so much thing is that is missing here. To be able to compute the Y well, you need to have the first, you have to go through the entire forward pass. So once you apply X, you need to find out what is the input output input activations at the input layer. You need to have the internal activations and the activations at the hidden layer. Then use those activations to compute the IOL and well. So the lots of intermediate steps are missing. So if you want to compute, apply this and you get this value, it's going to take half a day to compute it. and if you make an error in any one of them, then you got the you would have lost the this thing. In the new simulation program that is actually attached, I have changed these things, and I displayed the intermediate results. That is the internal activations for the input layer, and internal and activations for the input layer, internal and activation for the hidden layer. Then you have the IOL and OL. So in that case, if one is given, you will be able to compute the others. Let me show you how the in this case, obviously you cannot ask anything in this simulation test. So you cannot find out IOL, you cannot find out. So asking any questions on this one is going to be hard, and it's not solvable in time that is given in the test. So if you let me show you the new simulation trace, how it would look like, and how actually the questions can be formed using the new trace. So if you look at the new simulation trace in the recall mode, again if you look at this, the backpropagation is reading the network weights from the BPCKT file. In this case, some file names are given differently. Then obviously in all these cases you need to redisplay all the data that is being network being actually trained, and how many elements that you have, and so forth. From that, once the network is done for a given input vector, here this happens to be 433 network. Obviously, the number of inputs that program has to prompt should be the number of elements that you have in the input layer. So you would, because you have 4, it will say enter test input x equal 1 to 4. If you got 5, it will say x equal 1 to 5 and so forth. So based on that, it will prompt you how many inputs that you need to enter. So if you look at this, see if you apply apply the input that is applied here is entered input is one thing I made again even in this one was the entered value is when you enter only 1001. So when it's displays in addition to this, it also displays the bias term. So what is entered is really that one, that's the primary input in this case. So if you apply that one, you see now here it has computed what the input layer internal activations. It has computed all the internal activation for the input layer using these ILs. Then using these ILs, it has computed all the internal activation of the IHL. Using these IHL, we can compute all the YHLs elements. Then using IHL, we can compute the IOL and YOL. So in the previously, all these steps were missing. For example, you got all that, you have that, and coming directly up to here. So all these steps are missing. That's so obviously you cannot ask any questions if you don't have these things. Now, if one is given, we will be able to compare the other one. So if you want to have this one, it's very easy. You take the input weight matrix and multiply it with the, if you want to get say IL of 3, so basically IL of 3 here, what we have IL of 3, you can actually take this IL of 3 input element number 3 and multiply with the input vector, that is going to be the 1001. Then you get the corresponding value 5, and you take the activations are very easy to compute, because if you know the I, all these activations are simply nothing but e to the power of minus ig. I for element number 1 is that, and then you can compute the 1 by 1 plus e to the power of minus e to the power of minus ig. So the computation, then asking any questions will be easier in this case. So the that's recall mode. So the I might prepare some, make sure you know how to compute the if any one of these values are given. Obviously, if I'm asking YHL values, I would keep these input layer elements. On the other hand, If I'm asking for IOL, then I'll keep the values for the hidden layers. So again, if I'm asking for hidden layers, I'll keep the values for the input layer, and so forth. So based on which one is asked, you have all the previous values to compute, so you don't have to start from the beginning to compute these values. So that's more or less the how you need to know how to compute the values in the output simulation traces in the test. And again, this pages on these simulation traces are very, very important. And that's more or less covers the how to solve numeric problems in the how to fill up the blanks in the output simulation traces in the test. That more or less covers the entire backpropagation, and that is the end of this lecture. Bye.